next question is, what will happen if we get more days canceled or more early starts? How will we proceed with that?
Certainly. So right now, let you in on a little secret, we have about 9 hours of space in our schedule as of today. So we've already added some time to the schedule, both before and after school. We've also added a day in April and a half a day in May. Our next opportunity probably is our Thursday afternoon. So right now we release early for professional development for staff.
Yeah.
We may have to recapture that time and actually go to the regular end of the school day on Thursdays.
To make up that hour?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
What priorities were taken into consideration when making the plans to add the days?
So actually I was very fortunate. I do student and staff listening posts, and I happen to have both here the week that we were going through that decision-making process. So I got to talk to students and understand what their concerns were, and then I got to talk to staff. The big thing that I heard from kids was about their significant concern about losing minutes during second trimester.
Yeah.
So they were worried, especially the kids that have classes that only meet for a trimester. They knew that they were losing a lot of time. At that point in time, we lost 7 days, and then we subsequently lost 8. And they were really worried about how they were getting shortchanged for second trimester, so they wanted me to try to add as many minutes as I could to second trimester. And then the other big concern that the kids had were AP tests and how much instructional time they lost before the AP tests. So then after I talked to the students, I had a chance to talk to the staff, and I asked them, how would you add minutes to second trimester, and how would you add minutes before the AP test? And so the two things that came up were, could we add any additional days? We had that day in April. And could we add any additional time? That was the minutes. And then finally, the last thing that they were really concerned about was whether there was any opportunity to extend second trimester. And that's why we made that change from having it end on the Wednesday to having it end on the Friday.
What do you do on your snow days instead?
I go to the office. So everybody else gets to stay home. I'm at work. I'm usually up really early in the morning on those days, checking on the weather conditions, and so I'm usually at the office extra early. The only difference is that there aren't as many people in the office, and so it tends to be a little bit quieter, a little less phone calls, fewer emails.
So that some of the people are asking is that we might end up having more days added than we actually need.
Good question.
So if that was possible, we got most of the things done and there were extra days added, we'd be able to get those back.
So one of the things you have to know is that I love you guys, and I want to make sure you learn as much as you can. So we actually schedule more days than the state requires.
Yeah.
And that's because our focus is on teaching and learning in your education. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we provide the adequate education for you. We also have to make sure we comply with the state law. So what we look at is meeting your classroom expectations first and meeting the letter of the law second. So we won't go below the state minimum. Yeah. And then if we can add appropriate additional time, we will. And that's why even though we would have had to add only 3 hours of time to comply with the state law, we added more. Yeah. We didn't go quite back up to the number of minutes that we had scheduled before that. But now our big challenge is what happens at the end of the year. So people have asked, why didn't you just add days at the end of the year? So all those kids that missed all that time during second trimester will likely not have those classes at the end of the year, so it doesn't help them to get extra days. We also have lost all our seniors, so a quarter of our high school students are already gone. Yeah. So the end of the adding a lot of time at the end of the year doesn't necessarily add a great deal to the education for the high school kids. Then the only other thing I would add for you is it's probably not a problem for elementary students. So yeah. That education for them at the end of the year is pretty valuable. So now if we wind up losing a lot more time, we have days at the end of the year we have to add, we'll take a look at that. But yeah. We will at least meet the state minimum, and then if we've got the opportunity to give you some extra time that will benefit you, we'll add that.
Have your children ever affected your reasoning in deciding to cancel or
No, but they bother me all the time. So I have one son who's still here. He's a junior, and he gets a lot of pressure from his friends and sometimes from the teachers in his classroom to find out what's happening tomorrow. And so I get lots of questions from him about whether or not I've made a decision yet.
Will you make any changes to the 2019 or 2020 schedule to account for any future cancellations?
We already have more hours scheduled than the state requires, so we feel pretty comfortable with that. Hopefully, we won't have another winter like this anytime soon. I will tell you that one thing that the school board has asked us to do, and it's irrespective of the weather, but it could certainly be an issue as we look at that, is look at our Thursday early release schedule and look at alternatives that could, instead of being a Thursday early out, move to a half-day early out. So instead of every week on Thursday, be about every 3 weeks, you'd be off for a half a day.
Oh.
So that might also give us some options for snow makeup time if that happened.
What is your favorite or most memorable tweet or comment from a student regarding the cancellation or delayed days?
Let's see, probably my favorite would be, there was a meme that somebody made of the Dos Equis guy, which I thought was pretty humorous.
Yeah. All right. And some kids whose buses arrive late to school and cannot eat at home still have to come to school before 8:45, so what would you recommend?
We're looking at a couple of options for that. Actually, I'll back up and say one of the things that we are now working with our food service staff on is if we know a day ahead of time that school will be canceled the next day, we may actually be able to send food home with kids. So if that's an option, we're gonna look into that. They need to know, I think they said by about noon the day before, but if they know by noon the day before, then we can provide some assistance there. And then the other thing that we're talking about is on days when we have late starts, are there opportunities to provide additional food items that might be able to be easily taken out of the cafeteria and taken to class to eat?
Do you see any major consequences with this new schedule?
I think probably the thing that people look at from the outside in is it really valuable to add 10 minutes to the day?
Yeah.
And I know that at North Central, they're looking at adding their time at the end of the day because 8th period routinely gets shorted instructional minutes, and so they're actually excited about the opportunity to have a little bit more time in class there.
Yeah.
I know here at West, they added it to AFT. Teachers were really excited about that because between now and the end of the second trimester, if they've got students that need additional help to get to the end, they'll be able to bring those students in. So I think this is a good solution given the challenge that we had with all the days that we lost.
Is there anything we didn't ask you that you want students to know?
I think probably the thing that's most important and gets lost a little bit in this process is safety is still our #1 concern. We've got a lot of student drivers on the road at the high school. We also have a lot of parents that transport their kids to school by car. And then something I think people don't think about is the amount of time that kids spend waiting at the bus stop. And you could be at the bus stop 10, 20, 30 minutes, especially if buses are running late. And so wind chill is probably the thing that causes me the most concern. Not snow, but actually what happens when kids are standing out there for a long period of time. And so one of the calls that probably gets the most attention from us is when they project that we're gonna have really, really low wind chills.
Thank you for letting us
You're welcome.
interview.
Absolutely.